The sun is a hammer. The air doesn't move, it hums. It hums with the heat, the insects, and the memory of screams that have just faded. This is the island. It has a name, but the name doesn't matter. Peleliu, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. They're all the same place. A hell made of black volcanic sand, razor-sharp coral, and rotting flesh. A Japanese soldier moves slowly, almost automatically. His uniform is soaked in sweat and grime. Thirst is a constant dull thrum at the back of his skull. The battle has subsided, replaced by the grim work that comes after. He is searching for ammunition, a canteen of water, maybe some food, and intelligence. A body lies before him, an American Marine. The white devil, as propaganda had taught him. Not a man, just a creature from the other side of the world come to destroy his home. He is young, or was young. A boy from some place called Ohio or Texas, a place the soldier has never heard of. The Japanese soldier's hands work mechanically, searching the pockets. He expects to find a knife, letters, maybe maps. He finds a wallet, thick, soaked with blood. He opens it, and finds something he did not expect. Not a secret code, not an order. A photograph. At first he sees what he has seen in the wallets of his own fallen comrades. A smiling woman, a small child on a tricycle on a neat lawn. A normal scene from a world that no longer exists here on this island. But the soldier's eyes fix on something else. The background, the thing behind the family. It's a white, gleaming box, tall with rounded corners and a chrome handle. He doesn't immediately recognize what it is. Then he remembers pictures from pre-war magazines. A refrigerator. But that's not what shocks him. What shocks him is what's inside. The door is open, and it's packed. Bottles of milk, eggs, meat, butter, food, so much food it's overflowing. An abundance he hasn't seen even in his dreams. In that moment on this cursed island, this piece of glossy paper becomes more devastating than any artillery shell, because it shows the Japanese soldier not what his enemy has lost, but what he himself has never had, and never will. This isn't a story about a battle, it's a story about the moment a war was lost and won in the mind of a single man. All because of one impossible photograph. Let's give them names, just so they stop being anonymous bodies. Let's call the American Corporal Miller. He's from a town near Cleveland, Ohio. Before the war, he worked at a gas station, went to the movies on Saturdays, read Superman comics, and dreamed of buying a Ford. His world was made of steel, asphalt, and the promise that hard work always paid off. He went to war because his country told him to, because of Pearl Harbor, because it was the right thing to do. Let's call the Japanese soldier Private Tanaka. He's from a village you won't find on a map, surrounded by rice paddies. His world was made of wood, paper, and honor. He was taught that his body, his life, his soul belonged to the emperor, a living god. He was taught that death in battle was the highest form of existence. He went to war because it was his duty, because it was the way of the warrior. These two men should never have met. They were separated by more than just the Pacific Ocean. They were separated by centuries. It took propaganda to make them kill each other, a hate machine running at full capacity. To Corporal Miller, the Japanese were not people. They were caricatures from cartoons, yellow-skinned with buck teeth and glasses, fanatics who launched suicide attacks. Propaganda films showed them as a horde that had to be stopped at any cost. You had to kill them before they killed you. To Private Tanaka, the Americans were Kichikubeihei, demonic beasts from America and England. White devils, tall, clumsy barbarians with no honor or respect for their ancestors. He was told that if they came to his home islands, they would destroy everything sacred. He had to kill them to protect his home. And the system worked. There is no room for empathy on the battlefield. You shoot at a uniform, a silhouette, a threat. You don't shoot at a guy from Ohio, but the photograph in the wallet is a glitch in the program, a virus in the system of hate. When Tanaka looks at that faded image, he doesn't see a demon. He sees himself in another life. He sees a man with a wife waiting for him, a child waiting for him. He sees the same longing to go home that gnaws at him every night. All the dehumanization, all the propaganda, all the walls that had been so carefully built between him and the enemy crumble in an instant. The man he just killed wasn't a monster. He was just like him. But that wasn't even the most terrifying discovery. The emotional shock of recognizing their shared humanity was just the prelude. The real blow to his world wasn't delivered by the man. It was delivered by the object. Private Tanaka's mind stumbles. It tries to process the image but can't find the right file for it. He knows what a refrigerator is. He'd seen them in expensive Tokyo department stores before the war. They were symbols of Western luxury, meant for wealthy industrialists and foreign diplomats. But this refrigerator isn't in a department store. It's in a kitchen, in the home of a common soldier, a guy just like him. And that violates the laws of his reality. The world Tanaka came from was one of wood, paper and stone. His mother cooked on a shattering charcoal stove. To preserve fish, it was salted or dried. The refrigerator in his village was an ice house, a pit packed with ice brought down from the mountains. Food was a matter of necessity, not choice. When the war started, even rice was rationed. And now he's looking at this photograph, at this shining totem. And he sees not just food. He sees the carelessness of abundance. The refrigerator door is ajar, as if someone just grabbed a bottle of milk and didn't bother to close it. That detail screams of a world where food can't spoil because there's always too much, where energy is so cheap it can be wasted. For Tanaka, who has been living on a handful of rice and rotten vegetables for months, who has seen his comrades die of starvation and disease, this picture is not just a photograph. It's an insult. It's a lie. Things like this don't exist, but it isn't a lie. And his brain, trained to analyze the enemy, starts working. He stops seeing a kitchen. He starts seeing the system behind it. What is a refrigerator? It's steel. That means they have the mines, ore and foundries that aren't overwhelmed producing tanks and ships. They can afford to spend tons of steel on kitchens, boxes. It's electricity. That means they have power plants, copper wires, an entire grid that reaches every home. Energy that doesn't need to be conserved for war factories. It's mass production, Henry Ford's assembly line, standardization. Thousands of parts coming together at incredible speed. It's complex chemistry. Freon, rubber for the seals, plastic, and finally it's the food, industrial agriculture. A delivery system. Roads, trucks, an entire nation of farmers that can feed its army and its civilian population with so much left over that some gets thrown away. In that moment, Private Tanaka understands the most terrible truth of this war. He isn't looking at a family photo, he's looking at an American war factory in a miniature. And he realizes that his country didn't send him to fight an army of men. It sent him to fight an army of factories. The Second World War in the Pacific was not a contest of bravery. The spirit of Bushido was strong. Japanese soldiers fought with a fanatical courage that horrified the Americans. But you can't stop steel with spirit. This war was a contest between two economic systems, and it was the most lopsided contest in history. Let's look at the numbers. They are merciless. In 1941, the year of the Pearl Harbor attack, the gross domestic product of the United States was roughly 10 times that of Japan. 10-1. But that's dry economics. Let's translate that into weapons. Over the course of the war, Japan produced about 60,000 aircraft. The United States, 300,000, 5-1. Aircraft carriers, Japan built 17. The US launched 157, nearly 9-1. And so it went for everything. Tanks, trucks, ships, rifles. American factories operated on a scale that Japanese leaders couldn't even comprehend. Japan entered the war because it was desperately short of resources. Oil, rubber, steel. It was a small island nation trying to build an empire. America was a continent. It was self-sufficient. It was an industrial giant that hadn't even woken up until 1941. The famous quote attributed to Admiral Yamamoto after Pearl Harbor says, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." And that giant woke up. Factories that made Buick cars yesterday started churning out tanks today. Plants that stamped out Frigidaire refrigerators switched to producing machine guns. For an American worker in a Detroit factory, the war was an abstraction. He just went to work, made his part, and collected a good paycheck. Then he went home, opened his refrigerator, and pulled out a cold beer. For a Japanese worker in Osaka, the war was everywhere. Food shortages, constant bombings, 16-hour workdays. That's why the photograph of the refrigerator was such a powerful blow. Private Tanaka, sitting in his foxhole on this nameless island, was at the end of a very long and very fragile supply chain. Every bullet, every handful of rice had to cross thousands of miles of ocean under constant threat from American submarines. But Corporal Miller was at the end of an industrial river, an endless flow of everything. If he ran out of ammo, a plane flew over and dropped more. If he was wounded, he was evacuated to a hospital ship with the world's best medicine. He even had ice cream. The US Navy specifically outfitted barges to produce ice cream to maintain morale. In that moment, looking at the photograph, Tanaka realizes he was taught to fight the wrong enemy. He was prepared for a contest of honor, for a bayonet charge, for self-sacrifice. But he was actually fighting logistics. He was fighting economics. He was fighting Henry Ford's assembly line. And that was a war that could not be won. Is the story of the Japanese soldier and the refrigerator photograph a documented fact? I have looked. I have read memoirs, archives, and historical studies. I have not found a single confirmed case that matches this story exactly. There is no soldier's name, no specific island, no photograph itself. Most likely, in its canonical form, it is apocryphal, a military legend, a story that soldiers told each other around campfires and then brought home. But does that mean it's false? No, it means it's something more than just a fact. This story became a legend because it is a perfect distillation of the truth. It takes a complex, multi-layered reality, economics, logistics, culture shock, and packages it into a single, simple, and heartbreaking image. We don't need to study steel production charts to understand the difference between the two countries. We just need to see one refrigerator. And while this specific story may not have happened, there were hundreds, thousands of similar moments of insight. Veteran Eugene Sledge, in his famous book With the Old Breed, describes finding personal effects in Japanese foxholes, letters, family photos, diaries, and each time it was a blow. The realization that the enemy was a man like me, he wrote, was always a shock. Japanese veterans, in turn, recalled how they were struck by the quantity and quality of American equipment. Chesterfield cigarettes, Hershey's chocolate bars, cans of Spam. For soldiers who were starving, these items were symbols of unimaginable wealth. One Japanese officer recalled after the war seeing a captured American Jeep. He wasn't impressed by its speed or off-road capability. He was impressed by the quality of the welds. He realized that a country that could afford to make such perfect welds on a mass-produced, disposable military vehicle possessed an industrial culture unattainable for Japan. The refrigerator photograph is a composite image. It is the quintessence of all these small moments when the fog of war lifted for a second, and enemies saw in each other not monsters, but men, and not just men, but representatives of entirely different worlds. A myth can sometimes be truer than a fact. A fact tells us what happened. A myth tells us what it meant. And the meaning of this story lies in its tragedy. Because for Private Tanaka, this epiphany was not a salvation. It was a curse. What happens to a soldier when he realizes that it's all pointless? For an American soldier in a similar situation, there might have been an out, surrender. Yes, it's a disgrace, but it's a chance to survive. For Private Tanaka, there was no such option. The Bushido code he was raised on stated, "Death is lighter than a feather, but duty is heavier than a mountain." To be taken prisoner was an unthinkable shame, worse than death. It would bring eternal dishonor not only upon him, but upon his entire family. And so he finds himself in an existential trap. He knows his country is doomed. He knows his sacrifice will change nothing. He knows the enemy is not a demon, but a man just like him. But he cannot stop. His duty, his honor, the pressure from his comrades, the fear of his officers, it all forces him to continue. He must fight to the last bullet, and when the bullets run out, he must charge with his bayonet. And when the bayonet breaks, he must fight with rocks. The realization did not bring him freedom. It only brought him a deeper understanding of his own personal hell. Now he fights not for the Emperor or for Greater Japan. He fights because he is trapped in a system with no exit but death. This is why the battles in the Pacific were so brutal. When one side knows it is lost but cannot surrender, war transforms from a tactical engagement into a meat grinder. A ritual suicide on an industrial scale. Millions of Tanakas died on those islands, perhaps with this same horrifying knowledge in their hearts. But history loves irony. A few decades pass. The war ends. America, the awakened giant, helps rebuild a shattered Japan, and an economic miracle occurs. Japan, the country that had no resources, that lost the war due to industrial inferiority, becomes a global industrial leader. Japanese engineers and workers, with the same discipline and attention to detail they once used to build Zero fighters, begin to build Toyota cars, Sony televisions, and Panasonic refrigerators. And these refrigerators are better, more reliable, and more efficient than their American counterparts. By the 80s, Japan is flooding the American market with its products. Detroit, the city that was once the arsenal of democracy, falls into decline, unable to compete. The son or grandson of Private Tanaka now works for a corporation that sells millions of refrigerators to the son or grandson of Corporal Miller. History has come full circle, and within that circle lies all the tragedy, all the complexity, and all the strange, bitter beauty of the human journey. We have followed the irony of history, the rise and fall of economies, the war of factories, and in all this grand scale, in all this geopolitics, we almost forgot the most important thing, the photograph. It has probably long since yellowed and disintegrated, dissolved into the same earth as its owner, but the people in it, they went on living. Somewhere in Ohio, a woman became a widow. The child on the tricycle grew up knowing his father only through stories and that very picture. For them, victory in the war was not a triumph. It was an emptiness at the dinner table, a price they paid every single day. Somewhere in a Japanese village, Private Tanaka's family also waited. They received only a box of ashes and a notice that their son had died a hero, for the glory of the emperor. They never learned of his final moment of clarity. The entire war, with all its complexity, ultimately comes down to this, to simple human loss, and at the centre of it all is that refrigerator. We spoke of it as a symbol of industrial might, as an economic weapon, but in the end we realise it's something more, a refrigerator full of food, in a kitchen where a child is laughing. That is not a symbol of war, it is the symbol of peace. It is the very thing that countries, armies and governments are supposed to exist to. Protect. That simple, boring, beautiful normalcy. The desire for a full refrigerator is a universal human instinct. Corporal Miller wanted it, and deep down, so did Private Tanaka. And therein lies the greatest tragedy. War is not a clash of monsters and heroes. It is not a battle of good versus evil. More often than not, it is the tragedy of ordinary people who are made to believe they hated each other. People who all wanted the same thing, to go home, to their own kitchen,